They say family is supposed to protect you, but what if the same family becomes the reason you break? My name is Emily, and this is the story of how my own blood betrayed me. Not strangers, not outsiders, but the very people I trusted most. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about misunderstandings. It was about one thing: money. Cold, lifeless money that made my father and siblings forget every bond we ever shared. I didn't see it coming. Or maybe I did, but refused to believe it. When my mother passed away, I thought grief would bring us closer together. I thought we would hold on to each other. Instead, it ripped us apart in ways I never imagined. The day I was cut out of the will, I felt my entire world collapse. My brother, my sister, even my father, they all chose wealth over me. They didn't care about my tears. They didn't care about my pain. They just wanted me gone. But here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just destroy you. It awakens something inside you, and in me, it awakened a fire so fierce that I decided, if they wanted war, I would give them one. Before everything fell apart, I used to believe my family was perfect. I grew up in a small suburban town in Ohio, in a 2-story white house with blue shutters and a swing in the front yard. To outsiders, we looked like the picture of the American dream. Neighbors would often say, "You guys are so lucky, such a happy family." And honestly, for a long time, I believed them. Mom was the heart of the house. She baked cookies on Sundays, decorated the place for every holiday, and always made sure birthdays were celebrated with love. My dad was a little stricter, the provider type, but when he laughed, it filled the entire living room. My brother and sister, we weren't perfect, but I thought we had each other's backs. Some of my happiest memories are of us sitting around the dinner table, Mom telling stories about her college days, Dad shaking his head with a smile, and all of us laughing until tears rolled down our cheeks. I thought those nights would last forever. I was especially close to Mom. She understood me in ways no one else did. When I felt lost, she reminded me of my strength. When I doubted myself, she believed in me more than I believed in myself. She would say, "Emily, you have a good heart, and that's more valuable than anything money can buy." Back then, I never realized how prophetic those words would become, because soon, money would be the very thing that destroyed everything I knew. Looking back, it hurts to remember how naive I was, how safe I felt in a family that would later turn into strangers. For me, the beginning was filled with warmth, laughter, and love. But little did I know that love was fragile, and greed was waiting in the shadows, ready to tear it apart. The first cracks in our so-called perfect family began to show right after Mom's funeral. At first, I thought it was just grief. Everyone was distant, short-tempered, avoiding eye contact. But soon I noticed something else, a quiet calculation in their eyes whenever they spoke about Mom's things. One evening, only 2 weeks after she was gone, I walked into the living room and saw my sister holding Mom's jewelry box. Her fingers trailed over the diamond necklace, the one Mom had promised would be mine one day. When she noticed me, she snapped the box shut and smiled too sweetly. "Oh, Emily, I was just making sure these don't get misplaced." Something about her tone felt wrong, but I let it go. Then my brother started acting strange. He was suddenly obsessed with paperwork, asking Dad about the deeds, the bank accounts, the property. I overheard him late at night on the phone, his voice low and urgent, as if he was making plans I wasn't meant to hear. Dad, too, began to grow colder. He stopped eating dinner with me, spent hours locked in his office, and when I tried to sit with him, he would dismiss me with a wave of his hand. I told myself I was imagining things, that grief made people act differently, but deep inside, a pit of dread started forming. The moment that sealed my suspicion came one Saturday morning. I found a stack of documents on the kitchen counter. Legal papers, wills, inheritance forms. And next to them, in bold letters, was my mother's signature. Or at least something that looked like it. When I asked Dad about it, his face hardened. "Don't touch things that don't concern you," he snapped. His voice was sharper than I'd ever heard before. That was the first time my own father made me feel like an intruder in my own home. I didn't know it then, but those were the first signs, the beginning of the betrayal that would soon shatter my life. The day of the will reading is carved into my memory, like a scar that will never fade. We gathered in the dining room, the same place where Mom used to serve her famous Thanksgiving dinner. But instead of laughter and warm food, there was tension so thick I could barely breathe. The lawyer sat at the head of the table, his briefcase resting beside him, his eyes darting nervously between us. I tried to sit close to Dad, but he shifted his chair away, as though I didn't belong there. My brother and sister exchanged smirks, and for the first time I realized they already knew what was coming. The lawyer cleared his throat and began reading. At first, his words blurred together, my mind too clouded with grief to focus. But then I heard it. The line that shattered me. All assets, properties, and valuables are to be divided between her husband, Michael, and her 2 children, Daniel and Claire. My heart stopped. Where was my name? I leaned forward, waiting, praying for the lawyer to continue. But he didn't. The will was over. My mother, the woman who had once held me in her arms and called me her brightest light, had left me nothing. I felt the room spin. This has to be a mistake, I whispered. Check again. The lawyer looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Emily. This is the only version I was provided. My brother leaned back in his chair, a smug grin spreading across his face. Well, I guess Mom knew who deserved her hard work. My sister didn't even try to hide her delight as she slid the jewelry box closer to her side of the table. I turned to Dad, my last hope. Dad, you know this isn't right. Tell them. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. His jaw was tight, his face cold. Your mother made her choice, he said flatly. You need to accept it. It felt like a knife straight through my chest. I wanted to scream, to shake them, to demand answers. My mother loved me. I knew she did. She wouldn't have abandoned me like this, which meant only one thing. This wasn't her choice. Someone had manipulated her will. But as I looked around the table, at the greedy faces of the people I once called family, I realized the horrifying truth. They had all been in on it. My grief turned into rage, hot and blinding. In that moment, I swore to myself, if they thought they could erase me from her legacy, if they thought I would roll over and disappear, they had no idea who they were dealing with. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war. After that day, I stopped recognizing my life. The house that once felt like home suddenly became a prison. Every hallway echoed with memories of Mom, but instead of comfort, they brought pain, because now I knew her legacy had been stolen from me. I moved into the guest room, not by choice, but because my sister claimed my old bedroom as storage for the things she had inherited. She didn't even ask. She simply walked in one afternoon with boxes and said, "You'll figure something out, Emily. My brother treated me like a ghost. He would pass me in the kitchen without a word, his face twisted in arrogance, as if I didn't exist. And Dad, he became a stranger. The man who once tucked me in at night, who clapped the loudest at my school plays, now looked at me with indifference. Bills started piling up, but no one offered help. When I asked Dad if I could borrow a little for groceries, he shook his head. You're old enough to take care of yourself, he said coldly. I worked part-time at a small cafe downtown, barely making enough to survive. Every dollar went to rent, food, or gas. Some nights I skipped meals just to stretch what little I had. The worst part wasn't the hunger or the loneliness, it was the humiliation. My own family flaunted the wealth they had stolen, driving new cars, redecorating the house, posting smiling pictures online as if nothing had happened. And all the while, I was crumbling in silence. At night, I cried myself to sleep, asking over and over, why me? Why would Mom abandon me like this? Deep down, I knew she hadn't. Something darker was at play, but I didn't have the strength, not yet, to fight. That period of my life broke me. But it also hardened me. Every insult, every cold shoulder, every night I went hungry carved something into my soul. Resilience. I didn't realize it then, but those painful months were shaping me into someone my family would one day regret underestimating. Because pain, when it doesn't destroy you, It transforms you. It took months of pain before something inside me finally snapped. One night, after another long shift at the cafe, I came home to find my brother and sister laughing in the living room. They were surrounded by shopping bags, expensive clothes, and jewelry. My father sat in his recliner, sipping whiskey, not even acknowledging me as I walked in. I stood there in the doorway, exhausted, starving, and invisible. For a moment, I felt the familiar sting of humiliation rise in my chest. But then, something shifted. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't even speak. Instead, I walked quietly to my room, shut the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes hollow. I barely recognized the girl looking back at me. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't who I was. This wasn't who Mom raised me to be. She always told me, "Emily, you're stronger than you think. Don't let anyone silence you." Her voice echoed in my head, louder than the laughter downstairs. I realized then, my family thought they had broken me. They thought I would disappear, fade into nothing, while they enjoyed their stolen riches. But they were wrong. That night, for the first time in months, I didn't fall asleep crying. Instead, I lay awake, my mind racing. Ideas, plans, possibilities. Revenge wasn't just a fantasy anymore. It was a decision, I whispered to myself in the dark. They wanted war. Now I'll give it to them. Once I made the decision, I knew I couldn't rush. Revenge isn't about anger. It's about patience, precision, and timing. The first step was information. My brother and sister thought I was too broken to notice anything, but I was watching them closely. At night, when they left their laptops unattended, I memorized passwords, checked bank accounts, and skimmed through emails. I learned about their reckless spending habits, the debts they were hiding, and the shady deals my brother was making with business partners. My father, too, wasn't as careful as he thought. He had locked away Mom's documents in his office, but one evening, when he left his desk drawer slightly open, I slipped in and copied files onto a flash drive. What I found confirmed my suspicions. The will had been altered. The signatures didn't match. My so-called family had faked my mother's last wishes. I felt rage boil inside me, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was proof, and proof was power. The second step was allies. I couldn't do this alone. At the cafe, I had a coworker named Rachel who studied law. I confided in her, careful to reveal only parts of the truth at first. She helped me understand inheritance laws, how forgery worked, and what could stand in court. The more she explained, the clearer my path became. The third step was patience. I didn't strike immediately. Instead, I let them grow comfortable, arrogant. I let them think I had accepted my fate. While they partied and flaunted their riches, I was quietly building a case piece by piece. And the final step was deciding how far I was willing to go. Did I want justice through the courts? Or did I want something darker? A revenge so personal, so unforgettable, that they would never recover. Late at night, lying in the darkness, I realized I didn't just want them to lose money. I wanted them to feel what I felt. The isolation, the humiliation, the pain of being discarded like trash. This wasn't just about getting back what was mine. It was about making them pay. I decided the first move had to be invisible, something that would unsettle them without revealing my hand. I wanted a crack, just a hint, that would make them nervous and start showing their true colors in front of others. I started small. My brother loved to brag about his clean business deals on social media. He posted pictures of closed contracts, happy clients, and screenshots of bank balances. One morning, I sent an anonymous tip to a small business forum about a supplier who'd been scammed by the company he'd been working with. I included screenshots I'd found on his email and tied it to the company name. Within 48 hours, whispers started. A few local bloggers picked it up. A supplier posted a complaint. My brother called late that night, voice tight, trying to sound casual. "Some people are messing with our reputation," he told Dad. "Don't worry, I'll handle it." They handled it the way greedy people always do, by pointing fingers and covering tracks. They hired a consultant, paid hush fees, and started gaslighting anyone who questioned them. The more they scrambled, the more evidence I quietly gathered. Every defensive move of theirs left a footprint. At the same time, I used what I'd copied from Dad's office to open a discreet line of contact with a local investigative journalist. I didn't give them everything, only enough to spark curiosity, discrepancies in the will, unsigned pages, bank transfers that didn't add up. The journalist asked a few public questions, then pulled back, but the seed was planted. My family noticed the politician-type whispers in the background. An awkward question at a neighborhood charity event. A hesitant head tilt from a family friend. It all added up. I also started playing the role they expected. Fragile, grateful, defeated. I smiled at dinners. I thanked them when they offered leftovers. I let them assume I'd given up. That made their arrogance louder, and their mistakes easier to exploit. By the end of those weeks, their secrecy was fraying. They were paranoid, making errors, and most importantly, speaking in ways that proved guilt to anyone who was listening. That first step didn't topple them. It didn't need to. It cracked the foundation, and it revealed how fragile their empire really was. Everything I had worked for, the evidence, the whispers, the pressure, was now in place. I had built a quiet storm, and the moment to unleash it was chosen with care. This wasn't about impulse. It was about timing. I needed a stage big enough for the truth to matter. The night I chose was my sister's engagement party. They'd invited every neighbor, old friends, and distant relatives, the kind of event where appearances mattered more than souls. They wanted to show the world how well they were doing, to rub salt in the wound where they thought I was already healed. I saw it as the perfect place to make everyone listen. I arrived wearing the same soft smile they expected, holding a small bouquet because my mother would have wanted it that way. Emily, calm, fragile, grateful. That was my mask. Inside, I was a coiled thing. The first move was subtle. I had arranged for the journalist I'd been in contact with to quietly hand a folder to an old family friend who had a sense of justice. The friend took it home, skimmed the documents, and decided to confront Daniel privately. It looked like a private nudge, nothing more. But the friend was the kind of person who spoke in the right circles. Halfway through the party, as the band played and the toasts began, my brother started to grow visibly uneasy. He kept checking his phone, his face flushing. My sister, giddy on champagne, didn't notice. Dad laughed too loud. I clapped at the right moments, watching them unravel. Then the lever was pulled. A local online news site, the one the journalist worked for, published an article with the headline, "Local Family Under Scrutiny. Questions arise over recent will and business dealings." The article didn't name me or my family directly at first, but it quoted public records and hinted at altered documents. It mentioned a prominent local family and a pending investigation. Within minutes, phones buzzed across the room. People started whispering. Someone stood up and read aloud the headline from their phone. The room shifted. The air became heavy. Faces that had been smug seconds ago drained of color. My sister's smile faded, replaced with a forced laugh that sounded like a broken record. Then came the second blow. The lawyer who had handled the will, the one who had read those words that erased me, received an official subpoena that very afternoon. I had Rachel draft an anonymous tip to the state bar and to a legal watchdog about possible malpractice and forgery. Once the bar opened an inquiry, the lawyer's credibility evaporated. The man who had smiled politely as he pronounced my name absent from the will suddenly had to answer for his role. My brother tried to rally damage control. He texted people privately, denying the allegations, threatening lawsuits. But the journalist had more than a headline. He had copies of the documents I'd found, handwriting analyses, and an email thread that suggested coercion. The breadcrumbs were lining up like a trail straight to them. As the party dissolved into chaos, hushed confrontations, guests slipping out, someone whispering about calling the police, my family's polished image cracked in front of everyone. Neighbors who'd once praised their perfect life now looked uncomfortable. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years pulled me aside and whispered, "Emily, I always wondered. I'm so sorry." Tears came, but they were different now. Not the ones I'd shed in silence before, but ones born from vindication. Daniel stormed out, face flushed with anger. My sister ran after him, shouting that people were lying. Dad sat motionless, the whiskey untouched, as if the room had become a place without anchors. I walked out that night feeling hollow and strangely cleansed. I hadn't physically broken them. I'd removed the shield they'd hidden behind. The public scrutiny, the legal questions, the unraveling reputations, that was my execution. It wasn't bloodless in the sense that it didn't hurt, but it was precise. It struck where it would sting the most: their status, their pride, their lies. As we left, neighbors angled their cars away and whispered behind hands. The gossip machine kicked into overdrive. I knew this was only the opening act. The legal fight would follow, and with it, more exposure. But the hardest part, the illusion of invulnerability they'd wrapped themselves in, was gone. That night, as sirens and murmurs faded behind the closed doors of their lives, I realized the truth of what I had become. Not just a victim, but an architect of consequence. I had set the terms, and for the first time since Mom's funeral, I slept without the weight crushing my chest. The next morning, the world wasn't the same. I woke up to dozens of missed calls, texts, and even emails from relatives who had never bothered to check on me before. Everyone wanted answers. Everyone wanted to know if the article was true. I didn't reply. Silence was louder than words, and I wanted them to stew in uncertainty. By noon, the news had spread beyond our town. A regional paper picked up the story, naming my family directly. They detailed how the will had been contested, how signatures didn't match, how possible coercion of a vulnerable widow had been reported. Mom's name, my mother's name, was in black print, but this time, it wasn't twisted into their narrative. It was framed as a woman whose wishes might have been stolen. My phone buzzed again. Rachel called me, her voice sharp with satisfaction. "They're circling like vultures," she said. "Exactly what we planned. Your brother's name is Mud right now, and your sister's fiancé's family is already reconsidering the engagement. They don't want scandal tied to their business." That part hit me harder than I expected. My sister, who had laughed at my pain, was now crying publicly, humiliated in front of people she had once impressed. It wasn't pity I felt. It was clarity. She was tasting the kind of loneliness she had poured into me. Dad was different. Stubborn, proud, he didn't crumble. Instead, he doubled down, calling reporters liars, claiming I was manipulating them. He even tried to show up at my apartment, pounding on the door like a man possessed. But the police, thanks to a restraining order Rachel had quietly prepared weeks earlier, escorted him away before he could shout his venom in my face. The fallout wasn't just emotional. Banks froze certain accounts until the legal disputes were resolved. My brother's business partner, the same one he had bragged about at family dinners, backed out of a major deal. Suddenly, the empire they had tried to build on stolen bricks was crumbling, and me, for the first time, I wasn't scrambling to survive. I was watching from a distance, steady, deliberate. I started journaling again, writing not just about pain, but about power, about reclaiming what had been taken. Every entry felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. There were nights, though, when guilt whispered. Was I becoming like them? Had I gone too far? I thought about my sister's tear-streaked face, my brother's furious texts, my father's hollow threats. But then I thought of Mom. I thought of her laugh, her hands guiding mine when I was small, the way she told me, "Emily, never let people write your story for you." This wasn't cruelty. This was correction. Weeks passed and hearings began. The court sessions were brutal. Lawyers throwing accusations, documents displayed on projectors, my family's lies dissected line by line. I sat there, quiet but unflinching, while they squirmed under the spotlight. Every objection, every desperate denial only made them look smaller. And when the judge finally declared the will invalid due to strong evidence of forgery and undue influence, I didn't cry. I didn't even smile. I simply breathed, deeply, fully, like a woman surfacing after years underwater. The fallout wasn't just theirs anymore. It was mine too, the end of a chapter defined by betrayal. What came next was mine to shape, and for the first time, the future didn't terrify me. It belonged to me. When the gavel came down that final day, it wasn't just a judgment against my family. It was a release for me. The court recognized Mom's original will, restoring everything they had tried to strip from me. But more than the money, It was the acknowledgement that mattered. The truth had been spoken out loud, in a room where lies used to reign. My father's eyes avoided mine as the ruling was read. My brother muttered curses under his breath. My sister wept silently, her shoulders shaking as her fiancé slipped out of the courtroom without her. I should have felt triumphant. Part of me did, but sitting there, I realized revenge wasn't about fireworks or a single victorious moment. It was about the quiet steadiness of knowing they could never hurt me the same way again. Walking out of that courtroom, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Their world was burning behind me, and for once, I wasn't trapped in the flames. The following weeks were strange. Old friends who had distanced themselves returned with awkward apologies. Extended relatives who had believed my family's lies tried to reconnect. I smiled politely, but my trust was no longer something I handed out freely. I had learned the hardest way that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and love can be poisoned by greed. At night, when it was quiet, I would sit by the window with Mom's photo in my lap. I'd tell her everything, how I fought, how I stumbled, how I finally stood tall again. Sometimes I swore I could feel her there, proud, whispering that I had honored her memory. Rachel remained by my side. She was more than a lawyer now. She was family. Real family. She reminded me that revenge, when done with purpose, wasn't about destruction. It was about reclaiming justice when no one else would. I learned that justice doesn't always arrive wrapped neatly in the law. Sometimes it has to be carved out of the lies, forced into existence by sheer willpower. My family thought they had buried me. But instead, they had planted something stronger, sharper. Looking ahead, I don't know what my future holds, but I know this. I will never again let someone else write my story. I will never again stay silent while someone takes what doesn't belong to them, and I will never again mistake greed for love. They lost their wealth, their reputations, and their power. I gained something far greater: freedom, strength, and the kind of peace that only comes after walking through fire and surviving. And if you're listening to this, if you've ever been betrayed by the ones you thought would protect you, remember this. Sometimes revenge isn't about hurting them back. Sometimes it's about standing so strong that their betrayal can no longer define you. That is the truest justice of all. If you've stayed with me until now, you know my story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about survival. I lost everything I thought mattered: family, security, love. And for a long time I believed that made me powerless. But standing here after everything, I finally understand. Power isn't what people give you. It's what you claim for yourself when no one else will. My family betrayed me for money. They broke me down until I almost believed I deserved nothing. But I fought back, not just for the inheritance or the justice system's approval. I fought back because I refused to let their lies become my truth. And maybe you've been there too. Maybe someone you trusted used your kindness as weakness. Maybe people you loved chose greed, or pride, or cruelty over you. If that's the case, hear me. You are not powerless. You are not voiceless. And you are not defined by what they did to you. Justice doesn't always come wrapped in legal papers or courtrooms. Sometimes justice is simply finding the strength to rise again, to walk away taller, sharper, and stronger than before. That's what I did. That's what you can do too. So if you've connected with my story, if it's reminded you of your own struggles, or given you courage to face what's ahead, stay with me. I share these stories not just for myself, but for anyone who's ever felt broken by betrayal. Because revenge, when done with purpose, isn't just about them. It's about you. It's about reclaiming your power, your dignity, your voice, and trust me, there's nothing more powerful than that.